welcome to this deep dive. You guys sent in some really cool stuff, actually, about how to make team introductions impactful and memorable. And I'll be honest, I didn't really think it was going to be something I'd be super into, but after looking through everything you sent, it turns out there's a real art to it.
Yeah.
So we're going to uncover some surprising insights today that will help you make a great first impression, whether you're leading a team, part of one, or just, want to stand out when you walk in a room.
What's fascinating is that we often treat these introductions as, just a quick formality.
Right.
But they're really a powerful leadership tool. They set the stage for how others perceive the team and its potential.
So you're saying it's more than just reading off names and titles?
Oh, for sure. Think about it this way. Have you ever been in a presentation where someone was just, droning on about their team's credentials and you just completely tuned out?
All the time.
Yeah.
It's like listening to a phone book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you've probably also experienced those moments where someone introduces their team and you're instantly hooked.
Right.
Like that CEO in Dubai, remember his presentation went dark when the power went out.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of panicking, she's like, well, now that you can't see us, let me paint you a picture of my team so vivid you won't need the lights.
Whoa. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Did it work?
It totally did. She went on to describe her team in a way that really highlighted their resilience, their creativity, and their commitment. And not only did she win over the audience, her team actually ended up securing the contract.
So it's about turning what could have been a really awkward moment
Totally.
into an opportunity
Yeah,
to showcase your team's strengths.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Even in everyday introductions, though. The key is to really showcase capability and not just state titles. It's
Yeah.
about painting that picture
Yeah.
that helps people get it.
Got it. So how do we actually do that? Let's say you're in a regular meeting. How do you make those introductions stick?
It really all comes down to crafting compelling role descriptions.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, this is John, our marketing director, you might say, this is John, the creative force behind our latest campaign that reached over 1 million people.
So instead of that generic title, you're giving them context and highlighting the impact.
Exactly. And when you have a larger team, you can even use this to create a sense of anticipation.
Oh, how so?
You might start by saying, you'll be hearing from Sarah later, who spearheaded our expansion into the Asian market, but first let me introduce you to.
Right.
By the time you get to Sarah, the audience is already intrigued.
It's like you're creating a mini trailer for each team member.
That's a great way to put it.
I like that.
And remember, you want to create a balance.
Right.
So that everyone feels valued and recognized. I once saw a leader introduce her admin assistant as the strategic force behind the team's operational excellence.
Oh.
She highlighted how his attention to detail and his ability to anticipate challenges saved them countless hours and really kept the projects running smoothly.
So it's about reframing how we think about those contributions.
Yep.
Right. Finding those strengths in every role.
Totally.
Yeah.
Instead of viewing it as a chore, think of it as a chance to showcase the dream team you've built.
Okay, I'm already starting to rethink how I introduce my own team.
Yeah.
But I am curious what happens when you add in the complexity of different cultures. That feels like a whole other layer of what to do and what not to do.
Oh, you're so right. Cultural intelligence is crucial, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
What works in one culture might totally flop in another. Emphasizing individual achievements might be appropriate in some places, but in others, it's better to highlight the team's success.
So how do you navigate those differences? Is there like a cheat sheet for cultural etiquette?
It's less about rigid rules and more about adapting.
Okay.
I once worked with this global tech company launching a new product. Each regional leader introduced their team in a way that really resonated with their context. The German leader emphasized technical expertise. The Brazilian leader highlighted personal connections and team spirit. And the Chinese leader focused on collective achievements.
So it's about understanding those nuances and tailoring your approach accordingly. But what about within industries? Do those microcultures come into play as well?
Definitely. A team introduction that works for a creative agency might not be right for a financial institution.
Right.
You have to be aware of those subtle cues.
So it sounds like there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about understanding your audience, the context, and all those cultural dynamics.
Exactly. It's about building bridges.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means finding creative ways to connect. I once saw an American executive in Japan recover from a culturally awkward intro by acknowledging the misstep and then reframing his team's strengths
Good save.
in a way that resonated with his Japanese clients. He focused on their dedication to quality, their commitment to partnerships, and their respect for Japanese customs.
So it's about being aware, adaptable, and willing to learn from those experiences.
Absolutely. And don't forget about virtual introduction.
Oh, right.
Those add a whole other layer because you can't rely on those nonverbal cues.
That's a great point. You lose so much of that in-person connection. So how do you make those virtual team introductions engaging and impactful?
You have to be even more intentional about your language and your delivery.
Okay.
You might consider adding those personal touches, like referencing something unique about their virtual background,
Yeah.
or weaving in anecdotes that showcase their personality and their expertise.
So it's like finding those little digital breadcrumbs
Yeah.
that create connection and make the intros memorable.
Exactly. And remember, even in a virtual setting, a well-told story can really captivate your audience and leave a lasting impression.
This is all such great advice. But what about when things go wrong? What if a key team member is absent or the technology fails? How do we handle those gracefully?
Those unexpected moments can be challenging,
For sure.
but they're also opportunities to showcase your leadership and your quick thinking. Remember that CEO in Dubai?
Yes.
That was a masterclass in crisis management.
Right. She turned a potential disaster into a win. Are there any strategies we can use to handle those kinds of situations?
One effective framework is to pause, assess, convert, and elevate, or PACE for short.
Okay, pacey.
I like it. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're introducing your global team, and you realize your sales director, who's supposed to speak next, isn't on the call.
Oh, no.
Instead of panicking, you could say something like, Sarah's so dedicated to our clients that she's currently on site with them, making sure our latest project is a success. Let me share with you how her leadership has transformed our client relationships.
So you're taking a potentially awkward situation and turning it into a positive.
Exactly.
Smart.
You're acknowledging the situation, but you're also highlighting your team's strengths and dedication.
Okay, so it's about being prepared, but also adaptable, and knowing how to think on your feet. But what about those really awkward moments like mixing up team members' accomplishments? Are there any magic phrases we can use to recover gracefully?
Absolutely. Instead of saying John isn't here, you might say, John's commitment to this project means he's currently implementing the solutions we've been discussing. Or instead of apologizing for technical glitches, you might say, this gives us a perfect opportunity to focus on what matters most, the incredible people behind our success.
It's like having those little linguistic life rafts to help you navigate those choppy waters. But how do we stay calm and collected in those moments?
It's all about developing what I call emotional intelligence in crisis. It's about reading the room, adjusting your approach as needed, and never letting those unexpected moments throw you off your game.
So we've talked about crafting those compelling role descriptions, navigating cultural differences, and handling unexpected situations. Are there any psychological tricks we can use to make our introductions even more memorable?
You bet. Our brains are wired to remember information that triggers an emotional response. For example, a leader I know started her team intro by saying, in the next 5 minutes, you're going to meet the 12 people who are going to change the way you think about insert industry or field, and I'm going to prove it to you.
That's a great hook. It definitely makes you want to hear more. How else can we tap into that emotional element?
Think about storytelling. Instead of just stating facts, weave those facts into a compelling narrative.
Right.
I once saw a healthcare executive introduce her head of research by saying, remember that groundbreaking cancer treatment you read about last month? Dr. Smith is the reason thousands of families will get to hear the word remission this year.
Wow, that's powerful. You're not just sharing information, you're creating an emotional connection.
Exactly. And that's what makes those introductions stick. It's not about impressing the audience. It's about making them feel something.
So we need to think beyond credentials and achievements and really focus on that human element.
Right. Another powerful technique is to weave together professional impact, human connection, and future potential. Imagine introducing a junior developer like this. Meet Sarah, who wrote the code that made our app accessible to visually impaired users. She taught herself 3 programming languages during lockdown, and she's currently mentoring high school girls in coding. Next year, she'll be leading our accessibility innovation team. You've got that compelling story, a personal connection, and a glimpse into the future, all wrapped up in one introduction.
I love that structure. It's like you're creating a mini narrative arc for each team member.
Exactly. And remember, the power of beginnings and endings is key. Start strong, end strong, and make those introductions unforgettable.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from crafting those compelling role descriptions to navigating cultural differences and handling those unexpected moments. What I'm taking away from this is that it's not about memorizing a script or trying to be someone you're not. It's about tapping into your authentic leadership style and using these techniques as tools to amplify your message.
I completely agree. It's about telling stories that connect, showcasing your team's strengths, and leaving a lasting impression.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm already feeling inspired to revamp my own team introductions.
Me too. And I think your listeners are probably feeling the same way.
Yeah.
But we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, so let's take a moment to let all of this sink in. When we come back, we'll dive into some practical exercises and strategies to help you put all these great ideas into action.
Welcome back to our deep dive into team introductions. In the last part, we talked about the power of storytelling, cultural intelligence, and crisis management. Now let's shift gears and focus on how to actually put all these amazing tips into practice.
You know, it's one thing to understand the theory, but it's another thing to actually apply it. A lot of people get stuck because they overthink it. They try to make it too perfect and they end up sounding robotic or insincere.
Yeah, I think we've all been there. You're so focused on getting it right that you lose that natural flow. So how do we strike that balance between preparation and authenticity?
One way is to focus on identifying and eliminating those credibility killers.
Credibility killers.
Yeah, those filler words and phrases that we all use without even realizing it. The ones that dilute our message and make us sound less confident.
You mean like,
Those are definitely some common ones. But I'm also talking about phrases like responsible for or in charge of. They're so generic and they lack luster.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's like those phrases create a distance between the person and their accomplishments.
Exactly. So here's a simple exercise you can try. Record yourself introducing your team as you normally would.
Okay.
Then listen back and count how many times you use those filler phrases or generic descriptors. You might be surprised by how often they creep in.
That's a great idea. I'm definitely going to try that. It's like holding up a mirror to your own communication habits.
It is. And once you're aware of those habits, you can start to replace them with stronger, more impactful language. For example, instead of saying, John is responsible for marketing, you might say, John leads our marketing initiatives with a passion for innovation and customer engagement.
Oh, I like that. It's amazing how a few simple word swaps can make such a big difference. It's like you're adding color and dimension to the introduction.
Exactly. And that's what makes it come alive. But sometimes, even with the best preparation, things don't always go according to plan.
Right.
What happens when you have to adapt on the fly?
Right. Like when a key team member is suddenly unavailable or the presentation format changes at the last minute. How do we stay flexible and handle those curveballs gracefully?
That's where having a reality-ready framework comes in. Think of it like having a toolbox filled with different introduction styles and techniques that you can adapt to any situation.
Okay, I like that.
One approach I call modular introductions. It's like having a collection of Lego bricks that you can assemble in different ways depending on the context.
So instead of having one static introduction, you have different building blocks that you can mix and match.
Exactly. You might have a short, impactful version for a quick meeting, a longer, more detailed version for a formal presentation, and a virtual version specifically for online interactions.
That's so smart. It's like having a Swiss Army knife of introductions. But can you give us a concrete example of how we might transform a typical boring introduction using some of these techniques?
Absolutely. Let's say you're introducing your sales director to potential investors. Instead of the standard, meet Sarah, our sales director, you might say something like, everyone told us that breaking into the Asian market was impossible. Sarah didn't listen. In just 18 months, she built our APAC division from scratch, generating over $30 million in revenue. And she's not stopping there. She's already mentoring the next generation of market leaders. I can't wait to see what she accomplishes next.
Wow. That's a completely different introduction. You've got the storytelling, the impact, the future potential, all woven together. It's so much more engaging than just stating a title and a list of responsibilities.
Right. And notice how it creates a sense of momentum. It's what I call the success spiral.
Success spiral.
Yeah. Each element builds on the last, drawing the audience in and leaving them wanting to hear more.
I love that analogy. It's like you're creating a wave of energy that carries the audience along. But what about when you're introducing a larger team? It can be tough to keep everyone engaged when you have multiple people to introduce.
One way to overcome that challenge is to use what I call the anticipation builder. You subtly weave in references to each team member's expertise during those earlier introductions. By the time you get to their individual introduction, the audience is already primed and eager to hear more.
It's like creating a mini trailer for each team member. It definitely beats just reading a list of names and titles.
Exactly. And here's a challenge for you and our listeners. The 3-meeting challenge. For your next 3 team introductions, experiment with a different style each time. First, try the impact first approach, where you lead with each person's most impressive accomplishment. Then experiment with the future focus style, highlighting their current projects and what they're working towards. Finally, try the connection chain method, where each introduction seamlessly links to the next person's role. See which style feels most natural for you and resonates best with your audience.
That's a great challenge. I'm definitely going to put that into practice. But what about when you're introducing your team to multiple stakeholders with different interests and expectations? How do you tailor those introductions accordingly?
That's where adaptive introductions come in. It's about having different versions of your introductions that you can adapt to the specific audience. For example, you might have a technical deep dive for fellow engineers, a business impact version for executives, and an innovation-focused story for potential partners.
So you're essentially creating a customized introduction for each stakeholder group. It sounds like it takes a bit more preparation, but it's a smart way to make sure your message resonates with each audience.
It is. And remember, the key is to be authentic and genuine in your delivery. Even with all these techniques, if you're not coming from a place of genuine respect and admiration for your team, it will show.
That's such an important reminder. It's not about putting on a show. It's about showcasing your team's brilliance and passion. Speaking of, do you have any tips for ending those team introductions on a powerful, memorable note?
One technique I call the legacy lock. It involves ending with a forward-looking statement that connects your team's capabilities to the audience's future success.
Okay.
For example, you might say, now that you've met the team that transformed our industry, imagine what we can accomplish together in the next chapter of your company's growth.
That's a brilliant way to end. It leaves the audience feeling inspired and optimistic about the future. But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about those filler phrases that can undermine our credibility. What are some other common examples, and how can we break those bad habits?
Well, aside from the ones we've already discussed, another common culprit is overusing qualifying statements, like, I think, or sort of. These phrases weaken your message and make you sound less confident.
Oh, I am definitely guilty of that. It's like I'm subconsciously undermining my own expertise.
It happens to the best of us. But the good news is that once you're aware of these habits, you can start to break them. One helpful tip is to practice pausing before you speak.
Okay.
This gives you a moment to collect your thoughts and choose your words more carefully.
That's a great tip. It's like hitting the reset button on your communication style.
Exactly. And remember, it's a process. Don't beat yourself up if you catch yourself slipping up. Just acknowledge it, correct yourself, and keep practicing.
That's such great advice. It's all about progress, not perfection. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this segment, from eliminating those credibility killers to building a reality-ready framework and crafting impactful introductions. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some advanced techniques for creating those unforgettable moments that leave a lasting impression. So stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive on team introductions. We've been exploring some really fascinating stuff that you guys sent in about making those introductions really count, and we've covered a lot of ground already, from those compelling role descriptions to navigating cultures to handling the unexpected. It's clear that there's so much more to this than meets the eye.
Yeah, it really is a hidden leadership skill. And in this last part, I want to focus on some of those more advanced techniques that can really take your introductions to the next level.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready to level up.
All right. So we've talked about the power of storytelling and creating those emotional connections. Now let's explore how to make those connections even more powerful and more memorable.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One of the most powerful techniques I've discovered is what I call the legacy statement. It's about connecting each team member's work to a larger purpose, a vision for the future. Instead of just listing their accomplishments, you paint a picture of how their contributions are shaping the world around them.
So it's kind of like taking those individual achievements and elevating them to something even more meaningful.
Exactly. It's about showcasing the impact, the why, behind the what. For example, instead of saying, Sarah increased our sales by 20%, you might say, Sarah's innovative sales strategies opened up new markets, creating opportunities for small businesses and empowering local communities.
That's a great example. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the ripple effect of those achievements.
Exactly. And it's something you can start doing with your own team right now. Think about each person's unique strengths and contributions.
Right.
How are they making a difference? What's the legacy they're creating? Once you start asking these questions, the stories will practically write themselves.
Yeah. I'm already starting to brainstorm. This is so powerful. But I have to admit, sometimes it feels like no matter how much I prepare, those introductions still feel a bit flat. Is there anything else I can do to make them more engaging?
Absolutely. One technique that consistently works is what I call connection anchors. This is about linking each team member's contributions to something the audience cares about.
Cool.
For example, if you're presenting to a board of directors, you might highlight how each team member's work aligns with the board's strategic goals.
So it's about tailoring those introductions to that specific audience and their interests. It makes perfect sense.
It does, and it shows that you're not just delivering a generic introduction, you're thoughtfully crafting a message that resonates with your audience. And here's another powerful tip. Remember the bookend effect.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that earlier. It's about the importance of those strong beginnings and endings.
Exactly. So when you're introducing your team, start with someone who's going to immediately capture the audience's attention, someone who embodies the energy and innovation you want to project. Then end with someone who represents your team's vision for the future, someone who leaves the audience feeling inspired and excited about what's to come.
I love that. It's like creating that narrative arc that draws the audience in and leaves them wanting more.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what about those virtual team introductions? Do these techniques still apply when you're not physically present?
Absolutely. But you have to be even more intentional about your delivery. In a virtual setting, you lose those nonverbal cues, so your words carry even more weight.
So how do we create those wow moments when we're interacting through a screen?
One technique I've found to be particularly effective is what I call digital empathy markers. These are those subtle ways to connect with your audience on a personal level, even through the screen. For example, you might start each team member's introduction with a quick personal observation, like you might notice the hiking photos behind Mark. They reflect his adventurous spirit, which has been instrumental in our exploration of new markets.
I love that. It's like you're inviting the audience into their world, even if it's just for a moment.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment with different virtual backgrounds and visual aids to enhance your introductions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From those basic principles to these more advanced techniques, it's clear that crafting those impactful team introductions is a skill worth developing.
I couldn't agree more. And the great thing is you can start implementing these strategies right away. Even small changes can make a big difference.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to issue one final challenge to our listeners. Think about one member of your team and try writing 3 different introductions for them. One focusing on their past achievements, one on their current impact, and one on their future potential. Then record yourself delivering each version. Which one captures their essence best? Which one makes you sit up and pay attention? That's your starting point.
That's a fantastic challenge. And remember, it's all about practice. The more you experiment with these techniques, the more confident and effective you'll become.
This has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
My pleasure.
We've learned that team introductions are so much more than just a formality. They're a chance to inspire, to connect, and to really showcase the incredible talent within our teams.
And remember, every introduction is an opportunity to tell a story, to make a difference, and to leave a lasting impression.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed it and learned some valuable insights along the way. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with confidence.